Today, we're going to unpack one of the most tangled and high-stakes relationships in the entire world, the one between the United States and Iran. It's an incredible story of how two friends became fierce enemies in a conflict that honestly could still blow up at any moment.
So just imagine this for a second. What if two nations, who were once really close partners, turned into such bitter rivals that the entire world is constantly holding its breath, just worried that their next move could ignite a massive war? Well, that's not some hypothetical. That is the very real story of the US and Iran.
I mean, just look at the difference here. It is absolutely night and day. Not that long ago, they were allies. They had shared goals. Today, they're enemies, locked in a state of almost constant tension. So the big question is, how on earth did it all go so wrong? That's what we're here to break down.
To really get a handle on this, we have to rewind the clock, way back to a time that might seem pretty shocking today. A time when the US and Iran weren't enemies, but actually allies.
Okay, so picture the Cold War. It's this giant, high-stakes chess game, right? And for America, Iran was a super important piece on the board. The U.S. threw its support behind Iran's leader, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, because he was very pro-Western. For Washington, the Shah's Iran was this solid, dependable wall against Soviet influence in a really chaotic part of the world. But here's the thing. This alliance, it was kind of built on sand. And in 1953, one single event happened that would completely shatter that trust, and it ended up poisoning the relationship for generations.
It really all came down to oil. Iran's democratically elected prime minister, a guy named Mohammad Mossadegh, decided to nationalize the country's oil industry, basically take it back for Iran. Well, the US and Britain were furious, so the CIA helped cook up a secret coup. They overthrew Mossadegh and put the Shah right back on the throne, giving him total control. Now, for the West, it seemed like a quick win, but for so many Iranians, this was an absolute betrayal. It felt like America chose oil and a dictator over their own democracy. And that deep, deep sense of grievance, it didn't go away. It just festered for decades, becoming a central part of the revolution that was just around the corner.
And yeah, that shattered trust didn't just vanish into thin air. It simmered right below the surface for years until it finally boiled over into a revolution that changed literally everything. So for the next 25 years or so, the Shah ruled with an iron fist. He even had a secret police force to crush anyone who spoke out. And because he was so tight with the United States, all that anger people felt toward the Shah got completely tangled up with their anger toward America.
And then, 1979, the dam just broke. A massive, popular revolution, led by this exiled cleric, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, just swept across the country. The Shah had to run for his life, and the monarchy was gone. In its place was the Islamic Republic, a whole new system built from the ground up on two main ideas: fierce independence and total opposition to the United States.
And all that revolutionary anger, it had a target. In a move that just stunned the entire world, radical students literally climbed over the walls of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took dozens of American diplomats and staff hostage. The alliance wasn't just broken anymore, it was a full-blown hostage crisis.
444. For 444 agonizing days, the whole world just watched and waited. That number got burned into the American mind. It became this powerful symbol of frustration and anger that would shape how an entire generation saw Iran.
When the crisis was finally over, the damage was done. It was permanent. Diplomatic ties were completely severed. There was no going back. The two countries that used to be allies were now, officially and very publicly, enemies. But the end of the hostage crisis wasn't the end of the conflict. Not even close. In fact, it was just the beginning of decades of hostility that would bring both nations again and again right to the edge of a real shooting war. For years, the fight played out in the shadows. When Iran was invaded by Iraq in the 1980s, who did the U.S. support? Iraq's dictator Saddam Hussein. Then, in the 2000s, the battle moved to a brand new and, frankly, terrifying arena: nuclear weapons. The U.S. was convinced Iran was trying to build a bomb, so it used its economic might to slap these crippling sanctions on the country. But then, in 2015, after all that tension, something pretty surprising happened: a breakthrough. It was called the JCPOA, or you probably know it as the Iran nuclear deal. In a huge diplomatic win, Iran agreed to scale back its nuclear program, and in return, the sanctions would be lifted. You know, for the first time in forever, it actually felt like peace was possible. That hope, though, it didn't last long, at all.
In 2018, the US just walked away from the deal and put all the sanctions back on. Tensions went through the roof. Then, in 2020, a US drone strike killed Iran's most powerful general, Qasem Soleimani. Iran fired back with missile strikes on US bases, and it felt like a direct war wasn't just possible, it was about to happen.
And that pretty much brings us right up to today, where all the embers of that long conflict are still smoldering. It's totally unresolved and dangerously unpredictable.
So, while they've managed to avoid an all-out war, the fight is absolutely still on. It's happening in the shadows, with cyber attacks, through proxy groups all over the Middle East, and always with the looming threat of Iran's nuclear program. There's no peace, no diplomatic relations, just this incredibly tense and dangerous standoff.
So you see, a story that started out as a strategic friendship has twisted and turned through decades of mistrust to become one of the most volatile and dangerous rivalries on the entire planet.
Which leaves us with the big, unsettling question. After everything that's happened, the coup, the revolution, the hostage crisis, all the close calls, is there any way back to peace? Or is this cycle of conflict just doomed to continue, with maybe the worst still yet to come?